I'm delighted to be joined in studio now by the Dublin Camogie star and 2022 All-Star nominee as well, Aisling Maher. Morning, Aisling. How are things?
Hi, good morning. Thanks for having me.
Absolute pleasure to have you in. A lot of success for St Vincent's this year. So you won the Dublin Senior Camogie Club title, first time since 2019. I know it's only a few year gap, but still nice to kind of grab it again after a few years.
Yeah, absolutely. Feels like a longer gap when you're losing 2 championship finals during that time.
And COVID as well, sure, probably makes it feel like.
Yeah, absolutely. Time's a bit warped, I think, for everybody. So definitely good to get back to winning ways.
So 114 to 10 points against Nafiana, and the guys were just saying to me like before the show, but I'd totally forgotten this, but Brian Mullins, club legend, had passed away not long before it that game, so that must have been quite an emotional event. Yeah, just on the way to the game, actually, that I'd heard he'd passed away. So definitely a bit of an emotional roller coaster. You know, obviously you're up and down before championship finals anyway, trying to process everything, and then to have something like that thrown in the mix is definitely a bit of a challenge. So look, it was something we spoke about prior to the game, and actually again at half time as well. I guess we just wanted to kind of remember him and honour him in the best way that we could at that time. Obviously the last thing Brian would have wanted was matches being cancelled or anything like that, so the best thing we could do is just go out and kind of play the way he played, I guess, and represent the club to the best of our abilities. So nice to be able to do that.
You certainly did it on the day as well with your scoring tally. Was it 12 points you got in the match?
Yeah, well, including frees, so I won't take too much credit for them.
Well, at 114 it's still pretty impressive.
That's Erling Haaland stuff. You're the Erling Haaland of the Dublin Camogie team, basically.
That's a compliment now. I don't think I've ever gotten anything that high before.
Yeah. Like when you get, I know it's team game, and it's maybe only after you retire that you can kind of look back and assess and appreciate individual honours. But like I said, All-Star nominee this year, and little things like that in moments, do they mean much at the time? Is it the kind of thing that you look back on and say, that means a lot to me? Or is it just one of those things where you're kind of coasting along in your career and you don't really think about it?
Yeah, look, it's always nice to get those kind of individual nods along the way, but like realistically, any of that sort of stuff, you know, there's still team awards regardless of whether or not they're given out to an individual, because without the team you don't get there in the first place, you know, that kind of way, regardless of whether that's, say, with the All-Star nomination this year, 2 of us from the team being nominated, it's because the team made it to quarterfinals that you're given the opportunity for, you know, players to showcase their game a little bit more and get those nominations. So I was slagging Ash, the other forward who got nominated, saying, you know, the 2 of us are playing in the full forward line getting nominated, we're stealing all the glory from the backs doing the hard work. But yeah, look, they're always nice to get.
Like, it's funny because we were chatting to Lee Keegan and then a few lads yesterday on the show. Luke Connolly was on as well, and they're talking about the club success they've had this year, and I guess trying to compare it to the county success, and the comparison's always made, but I mean, how much more does it mean to win stuff? It's obviously lovely to win games and tournaments as well with the Dubs, but when you do it with the people you've grown up with and the community around you in St Vincent's, like, it must mean that maybe a slight bit more, maybe, does it?
Yeah, look, it's lovely to get back to the club, but you know, like you said, I'm in with Vincent since I was probably 4 or 5 years of age, so like it's a special feeling. You know, all the girls that I would have grown up with, gone to school with, hung around at home with, are all my mates on the team, so like it is definitely very special to get back to the club. And like that, even everybody outside of the team are people who've been coaching you, mentoring you since, you know, you're this height, so it's lovely to be able to kind of have that feeling of getting back in with everybody. And yeah, club is a very special one, definitely.
And how's everyone on the team feeling heading into Leinster?
Yeah, there's good excitement. We had a bit of a gap. We had 6 weeks between the Dublin Championship final and first round of Leinster. Right. So yeah, that's
this weekend you're playing Thomastown?
The following weekend, Saturday week. Yeah,
okay.
The 12th we're out. So getting towards the latter stages of 6 weeks now, thankfully, because it's long enough, like, to keep it going for, you know, and you can't keep energy and momentum and everything up at 90 for 6 weeks. So to be fair to management, I think they've done a good job of, you know, letting us come down for a little bit, but then you have the effort of trying to push it back up again. So yeah, look, I think we're going well. Looking forward to actually just getting out on the pitch now. Kind of starting to get impatient in the last week, if anything.
Do you have any games in between times, like even just friendly sort of ones, to kind of keep you in that game mentality? Because as you say, if you're just training for 6 weeks, that's really hard to get yourself like game sharp.
Yeah, absolutely. No, we did, thankfully, and I think you'd need to, like, you couldn't keep the momentum going just with training, I don't think, for that long. So yeah, no, thankfully we've managed to play kind of close enough to achieve challenge game a week at this rate, whether they're kind of in-house or colleges or other club teams that are still going. You know, you're kind of just taking games off anyone you can get this time of year.
Exactly. Aisling, will you settle the debate for us? Is it a hurl or a hurley? We had Paddy Stapleton on the show yesterday, and he's written a couple of children's books, and he's given the title. He's done both. Like, he's printed both because he knows it's a controversial topic. I think we put a poll up the other day, and it was fairly split down the middle.
Split.
I think it's a geographical thing, but like, what did you call it?
Yeah, I think it's geographical as well. And it was funny because I was in at the launch for the club championships that AIB were hosting the other day, and even like the guys on set were saying, "Hey, do you want me to call it a hurley? Do you want me to call it a hurley?" And I was saying I always call it a hurl, but like
So
Jesse
did I.
Hutchinson, I know, was chatting to you guys, and he was in there, and he was like, "Absolutely not! Like, it's a hurley."
All the lads in Munster called it a hurley.
Yeah, now some people get very offended. I wouldn't get offended either way, but I would call it a hurl. I'd have to
Call him a producer.
firmly go.
He's the Cork man in the box there already sent him here. It's a hurley. Sorry, is that a bad? That's a bad accent. It's a hurl, I think.
I think it's a hurl as well. He's not here, so we'll
exactly. Yeah.
I say with hurl as well, so that's
You call it
3.
hurl?
Yeah.
3 out of 3, 100%.
Sorry. Like, it was the cutest thing ever. Paddy brought in his first hurl/hurley, which was like the Tipperary colours on it, and I mean the thing must have been about this size. Like, it was the cutest thing I've ever seen in my life. And he brought it in, and he was talking about the process of getting your first hurl and like the way the hurl is made, and like it as I said to him, it reminded me of Harry Potter, like going into the wand shop and getting.
And
your
he
first
said it
wand.
was like going into Santa's workshop.
Yeah, I was like, this is amazing. Like, do you remember getting your first hurl? Was it not that magical a moment for you, or was it one of those things where you remember picking up a hurl/hurley for the first time?
Well, I actually do remember it, but for slightly different reasons, because my parents obviously weren't as sentimental as Paddy's were. What I remember is getting like a size 28 hurl, a 28-inch hurl, when I started playing, and I was only about 5, and it was definitely because my parents were like, you'll grow into it. We're not buying a new one of them every couple of months.
Not a pair of shoes, like, it's a hurl.
So I remember finding it only a few years ago, like, and I use a size 32 now, and I'm a little bit taller than I was when I was 5.
Yeah.
So I was like, what was the crack with that? I was like, we were updating school uniforms and boots and everything else. Didn't need another thing that was going to be too small for you every few minutes. So
Didn't work out too bad in the end.
No.
yeah, maybe that's the trick.
Probably is important, because I guess you have to. Even Paddy was talking about the fact that I can't remember what size of hurley he has, maybe 35, but he was saying like it's probably slightly bigger than he needs it, but he's a couple of times in matches as a cornerback hooked someone just had enough length in the hurl to do it. So it's one of those things you need to be comfortable with the weight and the size of it and the boss and everything, but like nobody really thinks about it outside the game, but I'm sure within the game you have to get it right. Sorry, I'm obsessing over it now because he was talking about the sawdust and everything, but it was just, he made it sound magical, the whole hurl making process, but also the process of picking your right one.
I think it is. I think it's getting more and more individual, definitely within Camogie. I can see it now, like in terms of, like you're saying, he's using one that's probably a little bit too long. That's very, I think, specific to kind of full back line, because obviously hooking and blocking is so important. Whereas like I play the full forward line, it's probably the opposite of anything. Like a size 32 is probably a couple of inches too short for me.
Yes.
Like if I try to hit the ball on the ground, there's probably a good chance I'll fresh air it 9 times out of 10. It's just that bit short. But at the same time, I'm doing the opposite. I'm trying not to get hooked, or I'm using a short grip more often than not, so it kind of suits me to have a lighter hurl that I can manoeuvre more easily, theoretically anyway.
You're a member of the Gaelic Players Association LGBTQ plus working group, and look, you've spoken very eloquently in recent past about male intercounty players especially trying to come out publicly, and we just haven't had a level of players coming out, certainly in the male game anyway. Like, do you think we're heading in the right direction in terms of players feeling comfortable coming out and being open about that?
Yeah, look, I definitely think we're heading in the right direction. I think even the establishment of this LGBTQ plus working group by the GPA is a big step in the right direction, because, you know, you're opening the door, you're having conversations, you're creating that safe space within GAA as a wider family, where people can talk and, you know, have these discussions and hopefully eventually start to feel more welcome. Excuse me. And I think that's something that the GPA have done really well in terms of, like, you know, we hosted a Pride breakfast this year before the parade was on over Pride weekend, and it just creates a space where, you know, allies can come down, straight people can come down, and it doesn't have to be isolated to, you know, if I go to this event, maybe people are going to assume that I'm questioning my sexuality. You know, sometimes that's half the battle, is to create somewhere that everybody can come together and people can feel, you know, I'm safe, nobody's looking at me, nobody's wondering what I'm thinking, or nobody's, you know, suspicious of me or whatever it might be. So I think the GPA have done great work in that space, and I hope that it begins to kind of take off now over the next next couple of years and spread throughout the GAA. And yeah, hopefully over time we can create an environment that's more welcoming.
Apart from just like speaking out, and obviously you do quite a lot of media and you talk about it, what other stuff are the working group doing to reach out to clubs and reach out to, because I suppose one side of it is that you see these people in the media, you see them represented and you think, oh, that could be me, but also that kind of getting down to people's level and like the more grassroots element of it is probably quite important too.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things we did at the start that like I thought was, I was quite proud of, I thought was a great idea, was just to go out and do a survey. And it was of inter-county players now at the time. But, it's so hard to talk about these things when we don't have data. And you can sit here and you can hypothesise about this and hypothesise about that. But, by going out and actually asking people and, having those conversations with players, in an anonymous or confidential manner, at first say to allow people to say, well, yeah, I do know people on my team who are out or who are gay, both in the male game and the female game, then, what I learned from that first and foremost was that, there are male players who are out within their teams, which is fantastic because it means that they feel comfortable talking to their teammates and talking to their friends and their teams. But also, look, it's not anybody's obligation to come out publicly or to speak publicly about their sexuality. If they want to, fantastic. If they don't want to, that's their decision. But I do think we have to question ourselves as, an organisation and as a wider family. Is there more that we could be doing to make them feel comfortable coming out? And what are the reasons that all of those male players are choosing to keep their sexuality quiet or within their team or their friend group? And I think that, that's education basically in that way is a big piece of what we're doing. And yes, exactly as you said, the more we can gather information and educate clubs and smaller groups, then I would hope that, in turn kids going up will have better experiences.
Yeah, even you mentioned the fact that stats, like we can see from surveys, and like the survey earlier this year, like those stats are mad. Like the GPS subcommittee yourselves found that 69% of female players are aware of an LGBTQ plus teammate compared to just 10% of male players. Like that's a mad divide.
Yeah. It's a huge difference, but to be honest with you, I was surprised it was 10% of male players.
Yeah, that's fair.
I kind of thought it would be lower.
Yeah.
And I do think that there's so much that we talk about that the GAA are ahead of Camogie and are ahead of the LGFA, and I do think this is one of the areas where LGFA and Camogie probably have a bit of an edge on the GAA. And I guess we have to look at why that is as well to be able to move forward. And there probably is an element of the GAA. Now I don't want to speak on behalf of men, but I could imagine for a lot of GAA and hurling teams, there's such an expectation and a reputation of being, this kind of stereotypically masculine and strong, and I don't think that we've opened that space to allow men to, maybe fully be their authentic selves or express themselves in that way.
And it's across sports as well. Like, it's not just a problem within the GAA. We look at rugby, football, like it's everywhere. And even I think it's a sort of situation where it's not even something that's limited to, say, if there is a high-profile GA player who comes out, that's not only going to affect just GA players, that's going to also affect like other people, like other kids that love rugby. They're still going to see someone in the paper every day and be like, he's okay talking about this. I could be okay talking about it too.
Yeah.
I thought it was great, like the few Leinster lads that have spoken out publicly about that. Like, I was really surprised that happened. I didn't expect it at all. But fair play to them for doing it. And if we had, as you say, no one ever has to come out, no one ever has to expose themselves in that way if they don't want to, but it would just be so great for us as a country to have that conversation a bit more in that sphere, because we do have it so much on the women's side. And it's not perfect by any means, but there's definitely more of that base there.
Yeah, absolutely. And the same thing with the guys over in the UK playing soccer who came out, Jake Daniels and them. I think I would like to think that the support that's shown to them, and it was a vastly positive reaction that was had. There was a couple of things that were upsetting though at the time. Like, I know when Jake Daniels posted initially, the comments were turned off on the original post, which is unfortunately, it's sad to see, but I could completely understand why it was done, because you just don't want to open yourself to that negative backlash. But I guess given that level of protection that was put in, it was nice to see then that so much of the response to it was so positive, and that there was so many organisations across the UK, particularly obviously soccer clubs and stuff, who very vocally supported him and supported his decision. Because exactly as you said, you can imagine if you're a young guy playing any sport with the aspirations to play at a high level or play professionally, it has to be very, you know, comforting and reassuring to see these big organisations just step up and to publicly state, you know, rather than saying, oh well, it's assumed, to actually make a point to saying we are supportive of this and we are an open and inclusive environment.
Because every so often you see some absolutely crazy comments, like the priest in Listowel this week coming out with comments about transgenderism and homosexuality and teenagers using condoms. Like, every so often you'll get just crazy stuff like that sets people back. But also I think the reaction has been fairly positive in its condemning of comments like that.
Yeah, and it's hard to see as well, like, you know, like, how are we still giving platforms to these people in one way? Like, it boggles the mind. And look, it's a difficult one to kind of get your head around, and it's a difficult one even to comment on, because I kind of went back and forward on it a little bit. You know, do you come out and condemn something?
Do you even talk about it?
Yeah, exactly. That's so obviously terrible. Or do you even bother giving them oxygen? Like, you know, why are we covering something that seems so archaic? But unfortunately, at the same time, it's very representative of a lot of the views of the Catholic Church, at least on paper or in theory. So we probably do have to discuss it to an extent, because, you know, you'd nearly wonder how many people are religious and attend mass every week and don't agree with, you know, the things he's saying that are maybe against abortion, or, as you said, teenagers using condoms, or whether it's homosexuality. So I guess from an awareness perspective, A, it's good to highlight that, and B, it's probably good to show that, you know, we've passed gay marriage referendums, and that's fantastic to be one of the first countries to pass that by popular vote. But at the same time, that doesn't fix everything. You know, that's not a we're done now, we can forget about this and move on kind of. So I think it's good to highlight that there probably is still a lot of work that needs to be done, and still people who, you know, think they can go out and preach these kind of, you know, hate speech really, and ridiculous perspectives. So finding the balance there, I guess.
Can I just ask you very finally, Aisling, just like the news that came about Adrian O'Sullivan, the Dublin Camogie manager, leaving his role, announced it, I think, on social media. So he's 2 years, I think, into his 3-year contract, and like he's referenced the application of the rules as one of his reasons for stepping aside. But did this come as a surprise to yourself and the other players? Yeah,
it was a surprise. Look, you know, anybody who manages, who coaches in the GAA is giving up a huge amount of time, and you know, they're a volunteer at the end of the day. Like, they put so many hours into it. So look, it's disappointing to see somebody walk away early from a contract like that. But you know, I think it's difficult maybe for us, because we've had so much change in management in Dublin Camogie, you know, over, I think I'm 10 years involved at this stage, and we've had like 8 or 9 managers in that time or something. So it's difficult to kind of break that continuity again, and from a player's perspective, I suppose that surprise kind of makes it that little bit more challenging. But at the end of the day, you know, like I said, it's a volunteer thing, and Adrian has a life and a job and a family and everything outside of that. So look, you know, I respect his decision, and if he can't commit to it and his head's not there, then you have to respect his decision at the end of the day.
Yeah, fair enough, absolutely. Aisling, great stuff. Thanks a million for coming in, and for settling the hurley debate as well. I think that's fairly important.
Put to bed now.
Yeah, exactly. People just don't even comment. Don't even put it in the YouTube comments. I don't care. It's hurl. And best of luck listening in the Leinster Championship as well with Vincent, and for the year going forward. No doubt we'll touch base again over the coming months. So a reminder, AIB, proud sponsors of both club and county, proud to launch this year's AIB Camogie Club All-Ireland Championships and the AIB GAA All-Ireland Club Championships. AIB is honoured to be entering their 10th season backing the AIB Camogie Club All-Ireland Championships and the 32nd year of supporting the AIB GAA All-Ireland Club Championships. This year we'll see AIB celebrating the toughest players of all, those who keep going and persevere no matter how tough it gets.